when we were doing some preliminary research about Cast.ai and your background, there were a couple things that jumped out to me immediately. So on like Cast.ai was a website, there's like the quote, cut your cloud bill in half. And I think a couple lines down, it's punish your cloud costs, not your engineers. So first off, like that's an incredibly attractive proposition. The second one was I had a recent conversation with a friend this weekend. They're a senior engineer on a small startup team, and they were mentioning, lamenting about the relationship with their manager. And they're talking about how they spend about $50,000 a month on cloud costs. And the mandate for the company is don't worry about cloud costs at all. And that was interesting in juxtaposing some of the other research with one of your recent articles about Snap's latest like earnings report and how that pairs up with their cloud costs and some of the big things about, $1.5 billion in cloud spend across 5 years, having that be about 40% of annual revenue. So like both cases, like within their total revenue, absolutely massive comparable costs. And so in thinking about Cast.ai, I was like, wow, that's a really attractive proposition. But also it really highlights the significant challenge of managing cloud costs effectively for engineering leaders. So all that to say, this is a huge problem. And I'm really excited to learn why this became such an important issue for you. And so can you bring us in a little bit more behind the origin story behind Cast.ai and why cloud costs and this whole issue became such a central focus for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can totally see where like the management team for the engineering friend you're talking about is coming from. Like when you have a growing business, you have to focus somewhere, right? So are you focusing as a startup? Growth is the profitable growth is the number one most important metric, especially for SaaS companies, software as a service companies. So you need to be growing, but you also need to show sustainable economics, right? So what does sustainable economics mean in software? It means that you have to have a gross profit margin that's in the kind of 80+% range, meaning your cost of goods sold can't be more than 20%. And when you're selling software, cloud costs are your cost of goods sold fundamentally. It's not your engineering cost because that goes into a R&D bucket. It's not your sales and marketing costs because that's where you should be spending most of your money. It's the cost of cloud and delivering your software. So while they're focusing on growth, very quickly they're going to realize that it's not one metric, it's multiple. And COGS is going to become a really important issue. If not now, it will be in the next kind of 12-month period. So Patrick, let me give you the kind of the genesis. Being a serial entrepreneur, I really found this pattern where we start a business when we have a real problem to solve. And so it can't be another person's problem that I'm looking at it from the sideline because I can't really empathize with that pain. I have to feel the pain innately. And cloud costs are a pain that I felt innately. So if we rewind back to 2014 or so, we started this company called Zenedge, which was a cybersecurity company. And we decided to cut our capital expenditure exposures. In other words, let's not spend a lot of money up front in buying servers and data centers. This was still 7 years after AWS was kind of invented. So we said, why don't we go all in on AWS and deploy the software in every single region, because it was the kind of software that needed to be local to the end customer. And so we did that. And lo and behold, our gross margin or our cost of goods sold metric was upside down. So every time we would onboard a big customer, the bill would spike. And I would have a lot of waste in the system, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. So it became this really, we talked about don't punish your engineers. It became this massive tug of war between my team and me specifically, and the finance team and our CEO. And rightfully so, they couldn't figure out why we couldn't get our costs in order. And so while that adventure ended really well, like we ended up getting acquired by Oracle, and the outcome for COGS was great because they have their own data center, so they were able to just migrate all of our software to their own infrastructure. That brought costs down dramatically. And customers really love the product. We failed on that aspect. Like we didn't build the business with the right cost of goods in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the origin story. And then I kind of shelved that for many years. And we came back to it when I realized many other people in the industry were having this problem.
There was a couple things that you shared that I wanted to dive into a little bit. You mentioned a couple different really important sort of economic and financial modeling concepts for engineering leaders. And so one of the things I was hoping we could do is deconstruct some of the principles or approaches to help somebody better control different cloud costs. But I wanted to go back in, and you were talking about like the key parts for like developing a good economic model for a software company is around like increasing the gross margin. You talked about sort of an 80% range. And then this other concept with like cloud costs is about lowering the cost of goods sold. Are there other kind of foundational economic concepts for an engineering leader that they need to be aware of when they're considering like building out the economic model of their product or their service?
So for engineering, those are the main ones. As an engineer, your input to the financial model is really the cost of running the software. Yes, there's engineering costs and there's like defect rates and how like other metrics are very tangential. Like I'll give you an example, Patrick. If you write your software poorly and your customers are unhappy with the quality, you'll get a lot of churn. And churn yields a poor economic model for a software company because you're essentially not growing your net revenue. You're churning that revenue because customers are leaving. But the most impactful and direct input from an engineering perspective into a company's financial models is the cost of delivery, of software delivery.